For 2 weeks, you pushed through. Late nights, tight deadlines, one thing after another. And somehow, you felt fine the entire time. Not great, but functional. Upright, working. Then the deadline passes. The pressure lifts. And within a day, sometimes less, you're on the couch with a sore throat or a pounding head or a fever that seems to have appeared from absolutely nowhere. It feels backwards. The hard part is over. Why does the body wait until now to fall apart? This isn't just a story people tell themselves. Researchers have actually documented this pattern directly. There's a real published term for it, sometimes called leisure sickness, describing exactly this experience. People who reliably get sick on weekends or right at the start of a vacation, immediately after an intense stretch of stress or work. Here's what makes the explanation more interesting than your body finally got a chance to break down. It's not that relaxing weakens you. It's that something was very possibly already happening inside you, days before you noticed, and stress itself may have been quietly hiding the evidence. To understand what's really going on, we need to look at what stress does to your immune system while it's actively happening. And it's more complicated than a simple stress weakens immunity story. Piece 1. A large body of research, including a major review of over 300 studies by psychologist Suzanne Segerstrom and immunologist Gregory Miller, found that stress genuinely does alter immune function, but not always in the direction people assume. Different types of stress, over different time frames, shift different parts of the immune system in different ways. One consistent thread through that research involves cortisol, the same hormone we've discussed elsewhere in this series, released steadily throughout periods of ongoing stress. Cortisol isn't only a stress hormone. It's also, quite literally, one of the body's own natural anti-inflammatory agents, the same broad category of effect doctors are aiming for when they prescribe corticosteroid medications for inflammation. Piece 2. Sustained high cortisol tends to suppress a specific part of your immune response, the inflammatory signaling that produces many of the symptoms you actually recognize as being sick: fever, body aches, fatigue, a heavy, foggy feeling. Researchers call this cluster of symptoms sickness behavior, and it's driven largely by inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines. Which raises a genuinely strange possibility. If cortisol is actively suppressing the inflammatory signals responsible for making you feel sick, then a real active infection, something you picked up days earlier, quietly, in the middle of your stressful stretch, could be underway inside you the entire time, without producing the symptoms you'd normally notice. Piece 3, and the actual reveal of this story. You may not get sick the moment the stress ends. You may have already been sick for days. The stress hormones circulating through your system the whole time could have been muting the alarm, not preventing the infection. Then the stressor ends, and cortisol, which had been elevated for the anti-inflammatory reasons we just described, begins to drop, often considerably faster than the underlying immune process that's been quietly building against whatever you picked up. With that suppressive effect lifted, the inflammatory signaling that produces sickness behavior is free to proceed at full strength. The fever, the aches, the exhaustion, they weren't being generated for the first time. They were being unmasked, arriving all at once, now that nothing was holding them back. This lines up closely with what researcher Ad Vingerhotz and colleagues found when they formally studied leisure sickness in the 1990s and 2000s. People reporting fatigue, headaches, muscle pain, and cold or flu-like symptoms specifically clustering around weekends and the start of holidays, disproportionately after periods of high work stress. It's worth being precise here, because this is where a tidy explanation could easily overreach. Vingerhout's own research points to more than one contributing factor. The cortisol suppression mechanism we just walked through is a serious, evidence-consistent piece of the puzzle. But his work also highlights psychological and behavioral patterns, including difficulty relaxing and certain perfectionist tendencies as additional contributors. The full picture researchers currently have is a combination of immunology and psychology, not a single clean mechanism. Still, the immunological piece alone reframes something that used to feel purely unfair. It isn't that your body waited until it was safe to fall apart, as if it were making a decision. It's that a suppressive hormonal signal, present for entirely different reasons throughout the stressful period, happened to be quietly muting symptoms of something that had likely already begun, and simply stopped muting them once the reason for its presence went away.
There's a practical detail worth noting here too, because respiratory infections in particular typically take a few days between initial exposure and full symptom onset, the incubation period. The timing of getting sick right after stress ends often lines up with an infection that was actually picked up during the stressful period itself, simply reaching its natural symptomatic stage right around the same time cortisol happens to be dropping. Two separate timelines converging on roughly the same moment for reasons that are only partly related to each other. None of this means every post-stress illness follows this exact mechanism, or that everyone experiences it with the same intensity. Individual immune function, the specific pathogen involved, overall health, and the factors Vingerhout's identified around personality and relaxation style all shape how this plays out. And frequent, severe, or unusual illness patterns are worth discussing with a doctor rather than attributing entirely to this mechanism. But for the ordinary, familiar version, feeling perfectly fine through 2 stressful weeks, only to collapse with a cold the moment the pressure lifts, current research points towards something more specific than bad luck. A real hormonal signal, quietly holding back symptoms of something already underway, right up until the moment it no longer had a reason to. Somewhere right now, someone has just finished the hardest stretch of their month, felt fine the entire way through, and is about to spend their first free weekend in weeks, sick on the couch. They'll likely blame the relaxing itself, as if their body had simply been waiting for permission to break down. More likely, something had already begun days earlier, quietly, underneath a hormone that had every reason to keep it quiet, right up until the reason disappeared.